Hello, good morning to our audience in Mexico and good afternoon to all those joining us from Europe. I'm Érika Ruiz Sandoval, and I welcome you to the second online edition of the EU-Mexico Think Tank Dialogue Initiative. This month, we're concentrating on how the European Union and Mexico are dealing with the various issues related to the topic du jour, COVID-19. And today we will be talking not only about one, but two pandemics. Certainly our latest nightmare, COVID-19, but also the very virulent phenomenon of disinformation, that is the so-called fake news, and the relation between them. At a time when human lives are at stake, accurate information can make the difference between life and death for millions of people around the globe and translate into better public policies. The opposite can certainly wreak havoc among populations that are already scared, not only of losing their jobs and their livelihoods, but also their lives. To better understand the relationship between the current pandemic and deliberate disinformation campaigns with political purposes, both in the European Union and in Mexico, as well as what governments, the private sector, civil society are doing about this, we will talk with Daniel Milo, Senior Research Fellow at the GLOBSEC Policy Institute. From COMEXI, Don José Carreño Figueras, Senior Journalist who specializes in Mexico and the United States and is currently an editor and international columnist for El Heraldo de México, one of the most prestigious Mexican newspapers. Agnieszka Legucka, analyst on Russia and in the Eastern Europe program of the Polish Institute of International Affairs. And last, but certainly not least, Guido, Lara, founder and CEO of Lexia Insights and Solutions, who has been a consultant in communication and qualitative research for more than 20 years. As the conversation moves along, feel free to post your questions on the online chat of this webinar. All the participants can see them, and at the end, we'll select a few of them for them to answer. Apologies in advance if we don't get to answer all of them live. So now let's begin. Some are calling the fight against fake news or disinformation a new front in the coronavirus battle, since bogus stories and half-baked conspiracy theories are surging through the internet, especially now that most of us who are stuck at home have nothing better to do than surf the web. We've all read articles or seen videos and WhatsApp messages about miraculous drugs that can cure COVID-19, that children and youngsters are immune to this virus, and even that 5G has caused the pandemic. Likewise, we've all been exposed to conspiracy theories about this being a virus purposely released with the purpose of creating political and economic chaos. Why should we worry about this? What is the true power of disinformation strategies, and what is their purpose? What are the main consequences of this phenomenon for democratic societies such as those of EU member states? Daniel, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Érika, and good afternoon from Bratislava, Central Europe, where we are based. Maybe a bit of a terminology at the very beginning, at the very outset, just to be clear what we are talking about today. I would distinguish between these three terms. First, misinformation, which stands for objectively false information, which are being spread without the intent to deceive or manipulate audiences. Distribution is usually also organic in case of misinformation. Unlike disinformation, which is different to misinformation by intent. In case of disinformation, there is a clear intent of those spreading such content to manipulate, deceive, or otherwise influence their audiences. Also, it's very often the case that disinformations are being spread not only organically, meaning without any artificial amplification, but in many cases, there are elaborate networks of botnets when we speak of Twitter accounts or fake identities on Facebook, or even whole networks of dedicated web pages spreading and disseminating this type of content. Fake news is a term that has been used, and I would even say overused in the last couple of years also by politicians, unfortunately, just to label any type of information which they do not necessarily agree with. We have seen similar statements of for example, President Donald Trump, labeling certain news as fake news only because they do not agree with his political views. So fake news could be actually both, either misinformation or disinformation, but in most cases, this term fake news is affiliated or is much more closely related to disinformation. But we would rather use the term disinformation or even influence operations if it's a part of a more complex a campaign aimed to influence audiences. And now I come maybe to your original question, Érika. Why should we care? You know, what's the real impact? Due to the interconnected nature of today's societies, the impact of such information campaigns could be really very, very significant. It could influence, and it aims to influence people's minds, people's political preferences, or even economic behavior of some part of population. There are many different types of disinformation campaigns. Some of them are made by actors purely for economic reasons, just to have profits. You know, all these miraculous cures, either for coronavirus or other illnesses. But other actors, when we speak of state actors, for example, have much more sinister goals. We have seen this in Central and Eastern Europe from 2016, when we at GLOBSEC Policy Institute started to collect, analyze, and monitor ongoing disinformation operations and attempts to sway people's opinion living in this region, specifically in favor of Russia, but also more recently we saw attempts by China to use the current COVID-19 pandemic to push through their narratives. But I guess we will touch upon these issues in more detail in the discussion.
Okay. Thank you very much, Daniel. Now let's go to Don José Carreño Figueras to have a perspective from Mexico. Are we seeing the same phenomenon of disinformation and COVID-19 in Mexico? What is the role information is playing in terms of protecting the population? You have 5 minutes, Don José.
Well, yes. Basically, the basic response is yes. The difference, though, is that in Mexico, this the whole problem of the pandemic, the COVID-19, is played against or inside a frame of politicization in Mexico. Not too different to what happens in the United States. The problem has been that both presidents in Mexico and the United States have put a lot of political capital at the beginning in, if not denying, just modifying the frame of reference. And what I'm saying is that the same way that Mr. Trump denied that the coronavirus would be a very bad or a bad problem because of political needs of his own, President López Obrador did something similar for his own beliefs. So the performance of both presidents, particularly Mr. López Obrador, became the fodder of political debate, particularly in the social networks. To give you an idea, it's according with a report from the National University, the most used social networks by Mexicans are WhatsApp, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So, but the users of Facebook, with 82 million users, have received about, claim that have received messages of disinformation or fake news, 70% of 80% of them. In the WhatsApp, 90% said that they have received fake news about COVID-19, and 91% of those who use Instagram. In Twitter, 89% received fake news. In YouTube, it was 83% of the respondents. So, and when the prestige of both presidents has been played on their response to COVID-19, and both of them have a very dedicated following and a very dedicated enemies, you can say the word, the whole thing became a hinder for the performance of the respective governments. And so you can see allegations about the delays of both governments to act in face of the COVID-19 in both social media, meaning both governments have been accused of being late in the whole thing. Trump has been accused to not react until middle of March, and the same thing could be said about Mr. López Obrador. Also, in the politicization of the COVID-19, the politicization of the social networks, you can see a crisis for both countries, and the crisis, a social, political, economic crisis developing specifically for Mexico in this case.
Okay. Thank you very much to both of you for giving us this initial perspective. Now let's dig a little bit further into Russia's disinformation strategies, particularly in Eastern Europe, and what are the tools the European Union has at hand to counter them with the focus on COVID-19. Agnieszka, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for joining with this very important issue. I welcome you from Warsaw, from PISM and Vistula. So going to your question, actually, the disinformation is not the new phenomenon. The experts are looking at it from centuries, let's say, like this, but something has changed because of technology and spread of information as a lot of puzzles of communicate. And that's why the coronavirus pandemic is so important, because we are living in the environment when the disinformation is very, very important, and this environment allows disinformation to grow. So when it comes to European Union perspective, the European Commission has identified Russian disinformation campaigns as the EU greatest threat, because one thing is systematic and it's well resourced and well prepared on large scale. So other countries like China, Iran, and North Korea were like copying Russia experience. But this time, this coronavirus pandemic and disinformation campaign used by other actors, we can see one thing, that China is no longer Russia's younger brother on this matter. It means that China is even more massive in this disinformation messages. Although two countries, Russia and China, have a similar messages, similar misleading campaigns that about origin of the coronavirus, and also they show up their purposes and their goals why they are doing so. They are trying to undermine social trust to government institutions, but nowadays we see that European Union is a target for especially Russia and China disinformation. Why? Because actually both countries from outside trying to change the order. In the short term, Russia would like to undermine the European and also Western sanctions. But on the other hand, Russia would like to change their view, the bad view about the coronavirus, because they were like hiding information from last year about the coronavirus, and now they are mixing the information that we see the false perspective. And China, with the help, like with the mass diplomacy, they are sending help to other countries, planes, and etc. And they are trying to change their image. At the same time, they are packing it in the box and with the whole propaganda message. And it's very, very something unusual to previous disinformation campaigns, that two countries, Russia and China, are working together, but not maybe directly, but their messages are the same. And why this information are so important today? Mainly because all these information messages, as Daniel said before, are based on emotion. Yeah, so anger, love, trust, uncertainty, those emotions are the basic things that we in this moment, we feel uncertain, we feel not that the situation is not predictable. So this is the best moment to feel with disinformation the whole campaign and spread its own goals in foreign policy. But also it was mentioned before that it's not only disinformation, it's not only a tool for the foreign policy, but also internal policy. There's mass house of disinformation. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Now, as a communication and qualitative research expert, Guido, what is your take on how Mexico's government, private sector, and civil society are dealing with information in general, but disinformation in particular around COVID-19? Are we following the same worldwide trend, or is there a Mexican way of doing this?
Always there and has been a Mexican way to do things. let me tell you, I would like to present my point of view with 5 dimensions. The first one is that to look that the people are the recipient, and every head is a world, and we need to understand that everyone is going to decodify information differently. The second one is to highlight that we are watching very bad practices at the top, very bad practices at the top. The third one is that already the conversation is poisoned, is already has been infected. This is very important because all the conversation that we are having here in Mexico with the COVID-19, even in the US as well, is poisoned with partisanship. One the relevant thing that we need to do as a society, and the private sector have their own role, is to protect journalism. These attacks against the media companies that is coming from the pulpit of the presidents in the US or even in Mexico are not good. And the 5th one is to highlight the great relevance, the protagonistic role that could have the fact-checking organizations. These are the 5 points that I would like to talk about. The first one is that we the people, we need to understand how people process information. If we are talking about false information, first we need to understand how people process information. We need to know that the people first react automatically, instinctively, because it's a matter of survival. So we process information instinctively and automatically. Second one is emotionally. Human beings want to be loved, we want to belong, we want to be part of something. And the way that we process information is related with our need of love and belonging. And the third one is that we have a moral arc and moral mental models. The things that we evaluate as false need to be related with our beliefs. If we are left or right, if we believe in God or not, if we are we believe this is fair or unfair. So with this package, we are not an easy target and easy way to handle objectively the information, because we are subjects. So to understand how the information is moving, all the perceptions related with the COVID-19, we need to understand that people in Mexico and everywhere react differently to different kinds. The same information, exactly the same information, the same facts are going to be analyzed and interpreted very differently in every person. We need to know that. The second one is to understand that we don't need really the Russians or Chinese to keep pushing false information, because that role it has been doing by the government by itself. We are seeing the president of Mexico saying things, hiding information, not promoting the good practices like shaking hands, the social distancing. And hours later, we have a different take for his own, the health ministry, saying all the good things that we need to know. There's a kind of dynamics, a strange dynamic with the good cop and the bad cop. And this is very bad practices at the top. If the president attacks on a daily basis the media and try to disqualify and discredit the sources of the media, this is very difficult. So we need to understand that the best practices need to be done at the top, need to be transparent, need to be clear, need to be accurate, need to be visual, and the civil society and private sector need to protect journalism and need to put a very great effort to fund, support, and visualize the fact-checking organizations that are helping the country. Here in Mexico, we have El Sabueso and Verificado COVID-19. We have our own fact-checking organizations in Mexico, and we need to support them and give them credit for the great work that they have done.
Thank you, Guido. Now I have questions for all four of you. What is the true impact of disinformation on society's reaction to a shocking event such as COVID-19? What lessons can you derive from the way the world has reacted to this crisis, whose scale is unlike anything we have seen before, both in real life and in the virtual world? And finally, in the end, who is accountable for this? Is it governments? Is it online platforms? Is it civil society? Is it individuals? Let's go with Daniel. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, so what is the impact? That's $1 million question, I believe. But I can give you one example from my home country, Slovakia, which is a small country of 5 million people. But recently there was a public opinion poll conducted by one of the news organizations here that asked people about their perception of the role of the EU, how EU is handling the crisis, and who is actually helping us, not only here in Slovakia, but who is helping other European countries. And quite surprisingly, the outcome was that for more than 60%, China was seen as kind of a role model in handling the crisis, but also as the only country that is actually helping other European countries. Yes, I believe we've all seen, the shipments of medical equipment from China, but the fact is that most of the shipments are, just usual contracts that are being, paid for and procured in an ordinary fashion. So it seems to me, based on this public opinion poll, but also the impact of information and let's say the spread of such narratives on social media, that this type of messaging and those narratives that try to portray China's approach as the best one, despite the initial cover-up and despite all these issues with WHO and so on and so forth, seems to be working quite well, not only in this region, but also beyond. And just to give you also a couple of examples, how this disinformation could look like. One of the most prevalent would be that the source of COVID-19 and of the coronavirus is actually not natural, but it's an artificially made bioweapon, either by China. One theory says that there was a secret laboratory in Wuhan and the virus escaped. Other theory says that, well, it was actually US or even US athletes that attended some games in Wuhan in October that helped to actually spread the virus, targeting Chinese population. And you can find many of these strange, I would even say, conspiracy theories circulating on the web, often contradicting each other. But at the end of the day, people are feeling unsure. They think, well, there are many different truths, or perhaps everybody lies and there is no truth whatsoever. And that might be actually the end goal of such operations, to erode trust in our societies.
Okay, Don José?
Just I will try to add a small example to all this. Yesterday in Germany, a government official was claiming that with the Chinese help to Germany, or the Chinese aid or medical aid to Germany, let me use the word, they were also the non-official suggestions that they would be publicly accepting and being grateful to the Chinese way to Chinese aid, putting out the statements of how China was an example to the world and how about international cooperation and the way to fight the coronavirus. That is in terms of China. In terms of there are another examples, but I would add only that I believe that it has been a combination. The reaction of the world about this has been a combination of amazement and disbelief. A few days ago there was what is a holiday in Mexico, the Holy Friday, and the tradition is to eat seafood. There were crowds in the seafood markets in Mexico City. No matter all the prohibitions, no matter all the advices, the authorities only send some police to take care of the traffic. And some of the people that were interviewed in television were saying, well, you know, they speak about this pandemic, they speak about this illness, but we haven't seen any of it. And in part, that has been a fruit of the whole debate in Mexico about in terms of the government's performance, meaning those who are firm believers on the president, they have a full confidence on him and his advice. If it is a full advice, if the advice is wrong, well, so be it. And those who are enemies do not have any faith on his in his words. And his words are truth. Well, so be it. So that is the climate, and that is the problem that countries like Mexico and the US are facing in this political environment.
Thank you. Agnieszka.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Okay, yeah? Okay, because there was some problem with the mic. Okay, so what can we learn from this pandemic coronavirus? I think that we can gain from it some kind of knowledge that we are surrounded by many information and many disinformation, many communicate. So as you said, that we are sitting in front of a computer and trying to figure out what is going on and what will happen next. So I think that disinformation, which is not new issue, but at the same time, it's not only the political matters, but also psychological, in psychological studies. So we having like problems with understanding what are the facts and what are the opinions. And exactly the coronavirus is showing that, because the opinion that it's only a flu, yeah. So at the same time, it can be observed or received as a fact or as opinion. So this is very good to understand the division between facts, which are supposed to be from top down, yeah, from political elites, from the government, should be like substantial, should be go directly and should be transparent, not to mislead people. But at the same time, we have a lot of misleading information. And what is very important for us as reviewers, as people who are receiving those information, that just to keep something that is already mentioned in many cases, articles, that okay, the social distancing is very good, but also information distancing is very good, because when we see some cases, some articles, some news, and we already feel that those information are some kind of touch our emotions, fear, trust, or distrust, it means that we need to some kind of keep it on distance. Yeah, so the lesson learned from this pandemic can also teach us as a society how to deal with disinformation campaigns. Because as I said before, there were many of it. The target was Ukraine, US, France, Poland, and we probably will talk about another example from this one. But still, today we really understand that disinformation can be very harmful. And José Borrell, which is High Representative for European Union, said that disinformation can kill. So this is something that the knowledge that we have to gain from this pandemic and all the misfacts, disinformation which goes around.
Thank you. Guido?
The great problem that we are facing is a lot of leaders, and we are having one here in the US and another one in Mexico, that they have won dividing the countries, being in a permanent campaign, dividing who is on their side and who is against. And they are permanent fighters against other ones. In Mexico, it's clear the idea that if you are not with the president, you are against him. There's no middle ground. There's not a space of common knowledge. So this is a huge problem, because he's at the top. He have the biggest microphone. It's a megaphone, and he's not stopping. Just today, he is fighting against the media, fighting against a very popular figure that is Eugenio Derbez, that we have done a lot of research regarding the people that the Mexicans love the most, and Eugenio Derbez is one of them. He have 10 million followers. López Obrador have 7 million followers, 3 million less. So if you get aside the facts and put people prestigious and people who is loved to compete for their versions, you are going to have a very nasty discussion and not related with the facts. We recently watched that yesterday, and now the struggle is still on the social media. And the sad thing is that nobody's looking for the real thing, the truth, the facts. They are just speaking and defending their own side. They are sitting in their own corners, and they are fighting, trying to impose their own truth. But the facts are not matter of version. You can have different opinions, but you cannot have different facts. And this is the thing with the alternative facts that Trump has one time, or the otros datos, another data that López Obrador has. So we don't, as I said, we don't need Russians and Chinese and foreign agents creating confusion. If at the top do not understand their role as unifiers, as people who need to understand that we need to face this as a country, unite and create a common purpose and common idea, we're going to have a lot more deaths that already we have had because of this misinformation and this politicization of the debate.
Thank you very much for your insights. Now we're going to take some questions from our audience. I'll start with Vincenzo Colarino's question, both for Daniel and Agnieszka. Can you give examples of Russian and or Chinese disinformation? How do we know it's Russian or is it Chinese? Daniel.
Yeah. If I may, European External Action Service, which maybe some of the listeners or viewers are not familiar with, it's kind of a European Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sort of. They have their own task force called Stratcom East Task Force, which is monitoring disinformation originating from Russia. They have a team of analysts. They have a network of cooperating NGOs that collect and analyze ongoing information campaigns from state-owned or state-supported Russian channels, be it Первый канал, RT, Sputnik, or many other outlets. And they have collected more than 200 cases of disinformation from early January till today. And all these articles are available on their website. And just to give you a couple of those, I mentioned already the one with the biological weapons, which really started to circulate already in late December and early January. But one of the most, let's say, pernicious ones targeting the EU are the types of disinformation essentially saying that EU is finished, EU is crumbling apart because of the COVID-19. Many countries would like to leave the EU because EU has failed them, despite the fact that EU has pledged 750 billion euros in economic support to EU member states' economies, and also by other different means, trying to alleviate the situation. But I can clearly see a very concerted effort on the side of state, Russian-funded media and their affiliated news channels try to portray EU as weak, as dysfunctional, or as an institution that has actually abandoned its member states at the time of crisis.
Thank you, Daniel. Agnieszka?
Okay, I'm closer. Okay, so one example from Poland, I would add to what Daniel said, because I don't know if you remember, Russia sent planes with medical equipment and help to Italy with the slogan named from the film with James Bond, "From Russia with Love." And at the same time, in the same day, in Polish newspapers and media, we have spreaded disinformation that Polish authorities did not allow this plane to go above Poland, above Polish head. So that was the first false information. And the second thing was that the Polish authorities did not allow masks to go through the Polish border, which was totally untrue, because at the same time the plane which went from Moscow to Italy did not even need to go through Polish territory. But it was like spread not only in Polish media and social media, but also by some diplomats and politicians from Russia, that there was a problem with Poland. So at the same time, Russia was gaining the very nice message, from Russia with love to Italy, but at the same time, they were disapproving Poland for something that we did not do, actually. And it was like undermining the solidarity of the European Union, what Daniel said, the trust for the European Union, and already the level of trust were supposed to go to Russia. At the same time, after this campaign to Italy, we can observe a lot of films from Italy that people were like rubbing out the flags of the European Union, and in the back you could hear the Russian hymn with musician "We Love Russia, We Love China." So, and it's working, as already Daniel said, that the support for European Union started to lower down, and the support for those help Russia and China started to rise. And this only the case that the algorithm is working, because you can observe a huge and massive troll actions under the account of Twitter from the European Commission, and from many politicians who are like pro-European. They have a lot of comments, hate speech, something that it's really unbelievable. I also receiving some emails that, what I'm saying is totally not true, and the European Union will, like, after the pandemic, it will collapse very soon.
Thank you. Don José Rosia Merena asks, how can the European Union support Mexican independent groups of science journalists that are collaborating with several organizations to verify journalistic news related to COVID-19, whose treatment of scientific information can help the population? Since you're at the front line of information, you are at El Heraldo de Mexico, how can the European Union help us?
Look, the main problems that Mexican journalism have these security problems that have been mentioned, the criticisms, let me use the word criticisms from the government, is that there is no advertising, there is no economic support. Now, I'm not asking for the economic support of the European Union or anybody, but the question is that there are organizations that provide certification and the certification of news that are probably in dire need of funding. Maybe that would be one way if the European Union has that kind of programs. The other side is that I'll say that Mexican journalism in general is in sore need of professionalization, of improvement. This is not a secret. So I think that that would be another part to it, an educational part to it. And maybe, just again, maybe the question would be how to improve the links between the European Union in terms of communication with the Mexican people, in terms of not only through the media, but through the social networks and through other means. I mean, there is no secret that for a number of reasons there is admiration. There is an admiration in Mexico towards Europe, especially towards Spain, France, United Kingdom, Italy, and Germany, which is the most, which are the countries we know the most. So I don't know. Maybe the effort could be done through those ways. But other than that, I cannot see much more what more can be done by the European Union without having a heavier hand in terms of economy and politics.
Okay, thank you so much, Don Jose. Now to Guido from Jacques Coste. In Mexico, fake news and disinformation do not come from foreign malign agents. They come from the president himself, who is a pretty popular leader. Hence, the person who is supposed to inform the citizenship is the agent of disinformation and is constantly harassing the media. Beyond the fact-checking platforms, how can the disinformation cycle be broken under Mexico-specific circumstances? What is the way out, Guido?
Unfortunately, I believe that there's no way out. It would be naive to see that if the people at the top is having all the megaphone, the media, the coverage permanently, it's pretty difficult for everyone to change and disrupt that circle of partisanship and fighting. What can we do? We can do journalism. One of the big problems that we have in the world is that more people has been employed as public relationists and lobbyists than journalists. This is a tendency. That is, more people is hiring people to defend their own interest, not the common good. This is very important thing. Other thing that we could help is, and the European Union could help to fund these fact-checking organizations that in Mexico are facing and struggling with a lack of resources to do their jobs, because it's pretty difficult to fact-check all the things that are happening in Mexico. So what can we do? We can try to push an agenda where the political leaders, not just the government, even the opposition, is not promoting partisanship. And we are facing a pandemic. People is dying, and people are going to die because of these political struggles. It's very sad to watch and very frightening at the same time, because if the people is just trying to gain advantage for their political agenda, not look for the measures, the things that people need to be done, all the recommendations and all the protocols that the World Health Organization already established, is a problem. If we devote all our time disputing the facts, for example, when people ask us here if Eugenio Derbez is a popular actor. It's a fact. Is a guy who all the programs, all the movies that he done is a pretty success. So it's a fact that he's a guy with a great rating. If we are not able to rely on the truthworthiness of the fact, it's going to be very difficult. So it's difficult if we do not understand that we need to talk about facts, not just defending positions. This is and if we do not disrupt this cycle, it's going to be very, very difficult to surpass it.
Thank you. Now, Ileana Rodriguez points to the big picture and asks why international organizations have not coordinated effectively to combat the pandemic and generate the economic cooperation strategy to support the world. Again, it's not only individual governments, it's not only the European Union, it's not only Mexico, it is also this belief in what international organizations and institutions can do. What can you tell us about that, Daniel?
I think that what this crisis has shown, unfortunately, is that, my country first principle approach seems to be working really. When I've been watching the developments here in Europe, but also in other countries, at times of crisis, it's, I think, also quite natural for the governments to take care of their own population first, and then only to think about any international, solidarity or support to other countries. This was the case when the coronavirus epidemic erupted in China, when many countries throughout the world have been actually sending medical supplies to China. And that also happened when the pandemic hit EU, Italy, Spain, France, and other countries.
Entonces, pues es más práctico y no se expone tanto al paciente.
Okay, now it should be fine. But to the question, why and how international organizations could work together. Well, I believe once the immediate medical, let's say, emergency is dealt with, because this is still very much the case in many countries, be it US, be it many countries in the EU, perhaps also in Mexico. Only then I think we can start thinking about how to rebuild the economy, because there is always this constant struggle between the social distancing and actually lockdown policies applied in many countries, and the need to support economy going. And there is always there has to be a right balance to be struck between protecting the population from spreading, from the infection from spreading, and on the other hand, from overly harsh measures which could cause a huge economic depression even.
Yeah, what you say is true. I guess the instinctive reaction is to protect your own first, and then we'll figure out the rest. But again, as it happens with climate change, which will be a topic for the last week of April with this webinars. As with climate change, this pandemic has shown that we need international cooperation. No country can go at it alone. And we are all accusing everybody else of lack of solidarity. And that is a poignant thing for the European Union, Agnieszka. What will happen the day after? When this is over, because we believe at some point this will be over, how will the European Union emerge from this with all the attacks it's receiving as of late?
It's a big task for the European Union, and I believe that the first step for every politician is, and also a human being, that they are trying to blame others, not themselves. So at the government level, that there is also some kind of disapproval for the European Union, that it's not the solidar, that did not have the solidar approach, did not help Italy and Spain. But at the same time, when we can consider the issue, the crisis issue, crisis management, we need to figure out that, okay, the job had to be done by states at the first step, because this is connected very basically with the security of their citizens. So the first step, we cannot blame countries that they concentrated on their citizens. But at the same time, let's ask a question: European Union will be helping afterwards, or will be blocking institutions? So I believe that even if the institutions, international institutions, are not so strong as we supposed to believe before, the answer is that other institutions, other European Union or United Nations, when you consider the climate change issues, so are they helping? Are they blocking us? So if we answer the question that they might help afterwards, then we need to have it, and we need to have a platforms to, at the end of the pandemic, we need to solve many other problems, not only health and security, health security issues, but also the crisis management with the economic hit. So I think that at the end of the day, the European Union be needed desperately by countries, not on the first step, but and especially after the pandemic ends.
Okay, thank you. Now, this type of crisis bring out the best and the worst in people. We've seen the best in terms of how doctors and nurses are doing their work, how they're protecting the population. We've talked about the worst in terms of governments who are still thinking about the next election and political purposes when lives are at stake. But also among civil society, Acer points to vulnerable groups, migrants, refugees, displaced populations, etc. What about xenophobia, hate, discrimination? Are we seeing that in Mexico, Don José?
Mexico is not an innocent country in many ways. We're even before this pandemic began, we have seen some expressions of xenophobia or some manifestations of racism in the Mexican society, especially towards the migrants from Central America. You can see it in the migrant camps. You can see it in the way that they had been treated at the beginning very well, and then nowadays they are sort of shunned, especially in the northern cities where they are camped. You have seen. I'm not aware of xenophobia, meaning criticisms against the Chinese, but there is a debate about where does the virus come from, as in everywhere else. But mostly you can see an idea that that the illness has been brought to Mexico not so much by the migrants or the foreigners, but by the higher class people that went abroad and then became sick, either bankers or very high level financiers or entrepreneurs that in one case went to Vail and became ill there, became contracted the contagion there. So it plays also in terms of Mexican domestic politics. And if I may, I would like to add some small point to a previous question. We do not need that the Russian or Chinese intervention in. There are reports of one bots or troll farm in Mexico City that used to have or claimed to have something like 4 million bots, and this about 4 years ago. Now they might have a lot more. There has been claims about bot and troll farms, both in Mexico City and other cities of the country, were supported by either private interests against the government or by the government itself. So we have a very, very strong activity in that sense, so much that very recently there was a complaint in Ecuador that the debate around the coronavirus in the country and the government performance have been fueled by bots coming from Mexico and bought or provoked by the former president of Ecuador or sympathizers. So we do not need that. We have our own problems. We're supposed to be the second country in the world with more fake news, just only after Turkey. So that will tell you something.
Thank you, Don Jose. So we have this problem, and I think we feel as impotent as with COVID-19. What can we do about it? Should governments or international organizations do something about bots and the role of spreading misinformation? This is a question by Cesar Pacheco. Guido, can we legislate? Can we put them in prison? Should we prosecute those who spread false information, or with the purpose of creating chaos?
First thing, we can begin identifying as the fact-checking organizations trying to understand if this statement is true or not, if this fact that is talking about has happened or not. At the same time, we have a lot of people have the intelligence, the data science knowledge to find out and to discover that kind of bots. Are not as easy as I'm saying, but we can develop a kind of civil society surveillance as a first step. Discover it, talk about it, say this is a bot, this is not real, this is not a human being, this is pursuing these things. There's a lot of analysis that can be done, understanding how the bots works. This is the first line of defense. Then the second one is to ask the platforms to be much more involved. As my knowledge of the COVID-19, my understanding is that Facebook and Twitter have been very successful taking out false information, especially when it's related with magic cures and that kind of wishful thinking. First, civil society watchdog, not just the facts of the performance of the government, how the networks, the social media is infiltrated and distorted by these forces. It could be the first one. The second one could be a more a legislative and this kind of efforts that you're saying.
Thank you very much. That's about it. That's the time we have. I wish we could stay here talking about this some more because I think it's a very relevant issue. We thank you very much for your participation, for this discussion, which throws light on the dangers of something as intangible as disinformation in the middle of a worldwide crisis such as COVID-19, and for the particular cases of the European Union and Mexico. I certainly see that we're on the same boat, both the European Union and Mexico. We're suffering from the same disease, both in terms of the COVID and of disinformation. And some cooperation should be born out of this after all this is over. We thank our audience for joining us and invite you all to fill out a survey that will be sent by email. And finally, we invite you to connect next Tuesday, same time, same place, for another interesting discussion on the economic implications of COVID-19 for both the European Union and Mexico and the world at large. Please be safe, wash your hands, and thank you so much for being with us.